and welcome dear students. Today we will take up session 3 of theme in the world history, the three orders of class 11th. The learning objectives of today's session are to help you understand the factors affecting social and economic relations, to help you understand the emergence of new towns and townspeople as a fourth order, to help you learn about cathedral towns and architecture of cathedrals. Well, students, in the last two sessions, you have learnt about the three orders of Europe, the first order, the clergy, the second order, the nobility, and the third order, peasants, free and unfree. You have also understood the term feudalism, which describes the economic, legal, political and social relationships that existed in Europe in the medieval era. We have also discussed the origin of the name England and the dispute between England and France over trade and territory. Dear students, you will be able to know about factors affecting social and economic ties between lords and vassals. Factors affecting social and economic relations. While members of the first two orders saw the social system as stable and unchanging, there were several processes which were transforming the system. Some of these, such as changes in the environment, were gradual and almost imperceptible. Others were more dramatic, like the changes in agricultural technology and land use. Let us examine these processes one by one. First factor, the environment. From the 5th to the 10th centuries, most of Europe was covered with vast forests. Thus, the land available for agriculture was limited. Also, peasants dissatisfied with their conditions could flee from oppression and take refuge in the forest. Europe was undergoing an intensely cold climatic spell in this period. This led to severe and prolonged winters, a shortened growing season for crops and reduced yields from agriculture. From the 11th century, Europe entered a warm phase. Average temperatures increased, which had a profound effect on agriculture. Peasants now had a longer growing season and the soil, now less subjected to frost, could be more easily ploughed. This made expansion of the area under cultivation possible. Second factor, land use. Initially, agricultural technology was very primitive. The only mechanical aid available to the peasant was the wooden plough drawn by a team of oxen. This plough could at best scratch the surface of the earth and was unable to fully draw out the natural productivity of the soil. Agriculture was therefore very labor intensive. Fields had to be dug by hand, often once in 4 years, and enormous manual labor was required. Also, an ineffective method of crop rotation was in use. The land was divided in half. One field was planted in autumn with winter wheat, while the other field was left fallow. Rye was planted on this piece of fallow land the next year, while the other half was put to fallow. With this system, the soil slowly deteriorated and famines were not uncommon. Chronic malnutrition alternated with devastating famines and life was difficult for the poor. Despite these hardships, the lords were anxious to maximize their incomes. Since it was not possible to increase output from the land, the peasants were forced to bring under cultivation all the land in the manorial state and spend more time doing this than they were legally bound to do. Peasants resorted to passive resistance. They spent more time cultivating their own fields and kept much of the product of that labor for themselves. They also avoided performing unpaid extra services. They came into conflict with the lords over pasture and forest lands and saw these lands as resources to be used by the whole community, while the lords treated these as their private property. Third factor, new agriculture technology. By the 11th century, there is evidence of several technological changes. Instead of basic wooden plows, cultivators began using heavy iron-tipped plows and mold boards. These plows could dig much deeper and the mold boards turned the topsoil properly. With this, the nutrients from the soil were better utilized. The method of harnessing animals to the plow improved. Instead of the neck harness, the shoulder harness came into use. This enabled animals to exert greater power. Horses were now better shod with iron horseshoes which prevented foot decay. There was increased use of wind and water energy for agriculture. More water powered and wind powered mills were set up all over Europe for purposes like milling corn and pressing grapes. From the 11th century, the personal bonds that had been the basis of feudalism were weakening because economic transactions were becoming more and more money based. Lords found it convenient to ask for rent in cash, not services, and cultivators were selling their crops for money instead of exchanging them for other goods to traders, who would then take such goods to be sold in the towns. Well, students, we knew that in what ways relations between the lords and vassals changed due to various factors. Now, we would know about the fourth order and new towns and townspeople in this session further. A fourth order, new towns and townspeople. Expansion in agriculture was accompanied by growth in three related areas: population, trade, and towns. Agriculture increased and became able to sustain higher levels of population. Towns began to grow again. This led to the growth of periodic fairs and small marketing centers, which gradually developed town-like features: a town square, a church, roads where merchants built shops and homes. Many people in towns were free peasants or escaped serfs who provided unskilled labor. Shopkeepers and merchants were numerous. Later, there was a need for individuals with specialized skills like bankers and lawyers. The bigger towns had populations of about 30,000. They could be said to have formed a fourth order. Cathedral towns. One of the ways that rich merchants spent their money was by making donations to churches. From the 12th century, large churches called cathedrals were being built in France. These belonged to monasteries, but different groups of people contributed to their construction with their own labor, materials, or money. Cathedrals were built of stone and took many years to complete. As they were being built, the area around the cathedrals became more populated, and when they were completed, they became centers of pilgrimage. Thus, small towns developed around them. Cathedrals were designed so that the priest's voice could be heard clearly within the hall where large numbers of people gathered, and so that the singing by monks could sound beautiful and the chiming bells calling people to prayer could be heard over a great distance. Stained glass was used for windows. During the day, the sunlight would make them radiant for people inside the cathedral, and after sunset, the light of candles would make them visible to people outside. The stained glass windows narrated the stories in the Bible through pictures which illiterate people could read. Well, dear students, now you must have understood about the fourth order and new towns and townspeople. That was the result of changing relations between the lords and vassals. Dear students, here is some creative home assignment for you. First, explain the factors affecting social and economic relations between the lords and vassals in medieval Europe. Second, discuss the new design features of cathedrals. Third, how did change in the environmental conditions help Europeans? Fourth, why do you think the people of new towns were considered of fourth order? Explain. With this, we have now come to the end of today's session. I hope you have enjoyed it. Remaining part of this theme will be discussed in the next session. Thank you very much.